Okay, welcome to Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. Hello, my name is Colin. Welcome to episode 19 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk, a show where we, the Roll by Roll gang, discuss various aspects of running a great D&D campaign based on our experiences with D&D 5e and our current Adventures in Emathan homebrew campaign. So joining me tonight are two of our three roll by roll crew. We have Barry, who plays Nightingale and Landis. Say hello, Barry.
Hello, Studio Alliance.
Excellent. We have Egan, who now plays Douglin.
I say hello from the other side.
And Max is part of our group, normally plays Kogon. Max has headed out to visit family for Christmas and wasn't able to join us tonight, so it's just the three of us tonight, gents.
Have a good Christmas, Max, if you're watching.
Yes, Max.
Absolutely. So, one of the topics that we have tossed around a couple of times now is the topic of character death in D&D 5e. So, being in the Christmas spirit and all, we thought, hey, today is the day to talk about character death. Um, so that's what we're going to do. For this episode, we'll discuss character death and some of our ideas on how to handle that in a campaign. So we'll start off with a question just kind of to warm up the night here. Gentlemen, can you remember the first time one of your D&D characters died? Or if not, what is one of the most memorable D&D character deaths that you have? So Barry, why don't you kick it off there? You look like you have no idea what you're going to talk about. So why don't you start?
Well, I've had so many characters die over the years that it's hard to really nail down one of them. But, like, so I happened to, for a short period of time, watch the Critical Role show. And this was
Oh, who are
like
they?
a third person observer. And during one of the episodes, one of the characters died. And I won't say who because, they get enough publicity and I'm sure everybody knows who I'm talking about. And it was just really impactful to watch that happen to a group who, that, clearly they weren't ready for it because this is way back in the day before they became, a big show. But it was really impactful to watch that happen to the group because they were all caught off guard and you could see it in the players' faces that they were shocked that this could actually happen. And I just remember sitting there being like, yeah, I totally know that feeling. Like when a character dies, you're never ready for it because, in the end, it's a random dice roll that ends your life. And, that's the great part about the game. It's some people hate that part about the game, but yeah, it was actually, watching that and being able to relate as a player to what I was watching. I'm like, oh, I totally know what you guys are feeling right now. You're just like, you don't know how you're gonna go on without that player and the void that it's gonna leave. And oh yeah, it was really cool to watch, and it was nice to know that everybody shares the same experiences when they play this game. And death is the one that really hits you where it really hurts. So it was that was my experience that I want to share with everybody.
Can't hear you.
Thanks. I may have just cracked open a can that had a drink, so I
Ah,
wanted to I wanted to
hey, I
keep
think
that
you
for
should
Ah,
leave that in.
jeez.
Leave that
Don't
in,
don't
Colin. Leave
don't
that
mute
in.
that.
Thank you for that, Egan. Yourself?
Um, yeah, I remember. I had this is back in the high school days, a very sinister DM, very sinister. Um, he was out to get players, not have fun with them. Okay. I was the cleric. I was the healer of the group. And I found boots of levitation And back then, how you treated magic and being able to use it was a little bit different. So basically, I put them on, and I was able to levitate, and I levitated to the perfect height of a Fomorian giant, taking a flail and just cracking me because he was hiding and I couldn't see him. Rolls a crit.
Oh
I
no.
still, I'm doubting that, but that's all right. I was completely surprised. Cracks, flies across the cave mouth, upside down, and slowly falls to the bottom. Gone, dead. That was the most impactful. And when you're a teenager, oh, you're pissed. It was,
It sounds like it was literally impactful as your character
oh,
impacted the wall.
Oh,
yeah,
badoosh.
looking back, it was beautifully set up. I tip my hat because it was described perfectly. It was I mean, it was beautiful in how nasty it was. So, yeah, that was my most memorable character death. And there was no coming back because I was the healer. That was it.
Yeah, for myself, so um, one of my very first Crow True Blood characters. That's a name that I've had multiple characters with over the years. I'm sure Barry remembers that name. He was a thief. This was an AD&D campaign run by a friend at the time, Ian. He was actually the guy who introduced me to D&D. And so my character was exploring a room in this dungeon, and I tried today to try and figure out what that module was. It was like an actual prepared module. So he's in this dungeon, and there are these globes of light on the ceiling. And my character smashed one of the globes and died instantly. And I I was devastated. I was devastated. I loved this character so much. Um like seriously, like I it was my first character ever died playing D&D. I'd only been playing D&D for I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 months at that point. Never even been in a game where a character died and all of a sudden I was just like, what just happened? Like my favorite character in the whole world just died. And yeah, it was a shocker. I'm not going to kid you. It was it 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 I may have even shed a tear over poor Crow. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal to me to lose that character, and we'll get into it a little bit, but that's something as a group, as a DM, as a player, you need, or as maybe another player, when someone loses a character, you got to realize, some people are really attached to their characters, and that can be quite a kick in the teeth when suddenly a couple of bad rolls or whatever, and you've lost your favorite character, right? So,
Yeah.
on that note, let's get right into kind of our first discussion question here, which is plain and simple, guys. Do we even need death in D&D? Like, is that something that you need to have a good night of D&D playing? Barry, your thoughts on that?
Well, my knee-jerk reaction is yes. If you don't have consequences to actions, it makes the game like you lose some of that tension, you lose some of that excitement. Like if I can always fight something and I'm not worried about dying, it's like to relate something that I was just recently playing, it's like being in Minecraft, where when you die, you get to keep all your gear. There's no consequence to dying, so you just run everywhere, right? So for me, yes, death in D&D is important because it creates a level of tension and excitement to combat that without it, I think you would lose a lot of players' interest in the game because it's just like, okay, yeah, I know we're going to win this. Let's just go get it over with. Okay, what treasure do we get? Blah, blah, blah. But when you know that with a few bad dice rolls, you could die, all of a sudden it's like, okay, whoa, let's let's take it easy. Let's take that 10-foot pole and tap on the ground to make sure there's no traps. Like it's something that's necessary in the game.
Egan?
Look at our reaction. Look at what you remembered 4 months after you
Yeah.
started playing, and I still remember it to this day. These are things that I think we love the game, but this solidified the impact this game can have on us. I don't think you have it, as Barry said, unless you have the threat, right? When I DM, I'm not looking to kill characters. That's not my point, but you're looking to challenge them. And part of that challenge is the fear of you're not going to make it out of here. You're adventurers, you're fighting monsters, legendary, dragons, this, that, and the other thing. You got to have that threat. And, I know we might get into more details on, how to deal with it, but just look at the impact it's had. I won't say how many years later, Colin. I won't do that to either one
Hey,
of us.
I figured
But
mine out, guys. I'm not afraid. It was almost 40 years ago.
40 years ago,
Yeah, it's
guys,
like,
you still remember the character. You still
Yeah,
remember how it happened. That tells me everything I need to know about whether it's necessary or not.
absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I agree with both of you. I think the answer is yes. I am going to talk about kind of another way to look at it, but like you've said, I mean, the potential that your character is going to die, it adds excitement, it adds suspense, danger to the campaign. It raises the stakes for you on every decision that you make when you put your characters in harm's way, right? If you put your characters in harm's way and you know there's no death, that really makes that decision different.
yeah,
And from a DM standpoint, to a lesser extent, it also adds consequences to actions, right? So it might keep that player from making stupid decisions, thinking there's no way that their character is going to die, right? It sort of
yeah,
lessens the Leroy Jenkins moments in the game when the characters are like, there's no consequences for running in there and kicking the dragon in the shins. I'm just going to go do that, right? Um,
exactly, exactly.
you know, if we look at our campaign, Adventures in Emathan, um, I honestly thought I was going to end up with a TPK during the battle inside of the Voidwater caves when we were in the Shattered Lands. That
Like,
fight was going very poorly for you guys. Though it was one of those nightmare roll scenarios where you guys
yeah,
and you hadn't really come up against as challenging a foe. And Barry, I remember you saying after we didn't know how to retreat. We had never ever figured out as a party how do we retreat from something that's going that badly, right? And to me, that was one
yeah,
of the best sessions we had in the campaign, because it really came close. I think it came down to some final moves that managed to save you guys. You know what? And that's that again, like you're saying, Egan. That's one of the most memorable things we've had in that campaign for me so far, right? And it's one of those moments where people really nearly died, right? So yeah, it's good.
Now, if I could, I think you hit the nail on the head. So it's not necessarily death, because I know there's going to be a lot of people like, really, is death what is necessary? But what really needs to be there are consequences. Now, if you don't want to run a campaign where death is the consequence, maybe if they die, they come back, but there's a consequence of, say, a level lost
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something else than that. So like as long as you have a consequence to the stupid things and the bad rolls, it can keep that tension going. If you're completely opposed to killing off people's characters, you can still keep that tension going and that like fear of loss by creating a consequence of some kind. And that could be something that people sit around a table and discuss beforehand. Like, okay, if we die, I don't really want my characters to die. So maybe you just drop a level every time you fail your death saves and you should have died. You come back to 1 hit point, but you're a level lower. So there, or maybe you lose an ability score, or
yeah, yeah.
something along those lines. There's got to be a consequence, or it's just not scary.
Yeah,
The
That's
title
I
scary.
can
agree.
be the title of this could be Death and Consequence.
Yes,
That
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think
Yeah,
that fits.
yeah, and that is the key, right? I mean, death is potentially a consequence, but you can look other ways to deal with
Yep.
that. So, moving on to our next question for tonight. So, do you guys think having a character die in D&D 5e is too easy, too hard, or a good balance? And I would say sort of referencing your any experience you have with other versions of D&D. So, Egan, why don't you start with this one?
I would say 5e is on the easier to avoid death side versus prior versions and editions of Dungeons and Dragons. I know we go back, we just dated ourselves, but you know, go to unconscious, three death saves. There are, all these ways to bring somebody back up to just one hit point. You even can do a medicine check to stabilize. Um, I
Healer's
like
kit.
them. Yeah, yeah, healer's kit. I mean, there are so many ways for a non-cleric to get you to be stable or stabilized that I would say it's easier than most prior editions. But that's not a bad thing. I think you gotta it's like hit points aren't actual like, oh, I bled for 52 hit points. No, you took damage or you avoided or your plate mail came off. Same could be said for death. It has the opponent has to work for it for you to get the final blow, if you will.
Yep. Barry?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with Egan. I think out of like the different versions I played, like starting at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, where there was just your hit points, and as soon as you hit zero, you were dead. Like that was it. Your character died. To where we are now, I feel like the game has become a lot more weighed in the side of the player. So like you get three death saves. Like Egan said, you got resurrection as a thing. You can stabilize a character very easily. Like I think it's a DC 10 medicine check, and you can stabilize a character. Like don't quote me on that, but I think it's something along those lines. And even for an instant death to happen in 5e, you have to bring a character. So you hit them for damage, you have to bring them to zero, and then the remaining damage has to equal their maximum hit points in order for that to be an instant death.
Or roll a
Like,
one.
so the
Or roll a one.
on a death save, but an
Yeah.
instant death
Oh, an
is,
instant death. I'm
like,
with you. Yep.
yeah,
When you
like,
hit,
like
yes.
Yep.
to say you have 15 hit points, you get hit by a fireball, it does 30. That's an instant death.
Yep.
But as you go up levels, that
Yep.
chance of instant death is even farther beyond reach. Like I just think the game, in its attempt to be attractive to new players, they've made it almost too soft in that area. Like it's just too easy to prevent death in the game for my liking. I like that risk. I write characters, I create characters with the understanding that they're already dead. I just hope it's going to happen in an epic way. Like that's just the way it is.
That's great.
Yeah, I agree. I it's in doing some reading for this session, the general consensus of folks that have been playing through the versions is it has gotten harder for a character to die with each version. It from AD&D to 3 to 4 now into 5. It's been getting increasingly harder for a character to die, be gone. Now you have to do something about bringing them back. Um, you do have options in terms of the way you play the game that you can make that easier to occur.
Mhm.
You know, but you guys mentioned it already. There's a lot of mechanics there to avoid death. I mean, healing is pretty easy to come by. You got stabilizing ability. There's magic items, death saves. I
Yeah.
mean, the only two things that freak me out are the instant death. But like you said, Barry, that really lessens as you get up in higher levels. And then just rolling a failing your death save, rolling a 1, and you're gone. We had our first sort of death, although it was in the dream, so Lafferty wasn't actually dead. But I mean, he died from rolling a 1 on a death save, right? And that can really,
Yeah.
if the character is doing something or the party is doing something and that gets trumped by rolling a 1, that can really stink. That's
Well, you just, sorry to interrupt you, man. You just totally reminded me of something that we have done to our game that, other tables may not have. You use a critical miss and a critical hit table.
yeah.
And I remember a session where Douglin was riding a horse
Oh,
and a
Yes.
goblin swung and he rolled a critical and he beheaded the horse. And
Yes.
you were like, if he had swung for Douglin, Douglin would have been dead. Like it
Yeah.
was just that easy. Like
Yeah.
because we have added that table, there's that even more randomness of craziness that can happen. So like,
Oh, I
yeah,
mean,
like
in a recent battle, Kogon would have lost a leg if it wasn't for his adamantine armor
yeah.
with those rolls. So that definitely ups the ante there for sure. So what, guys? What is your advice on dealing with death in a campaign? So, your campaigns, a character dies, and we'll get into the possibilities of how to bring them back. But this is just about dealing with the fact that a character in a session has all of a sudden died.
Who would you like to start?
Uh, Egan, you can go again for this one.
You got it. Um, Barry touched on something earlier, and the word was epic, right? I think if you can make, if possible, again, this is random dice rolls, so you never really know when a death is going to come. And also, if I could preface this, there is a different awareness between characters 1, 2, and 3 level versus past that. Because first level, you literally could get sneezed on and die. It's so you have to sort of play it a little bit differently. And I think there's even games out there or DMs that say, first level, you're not going to die. You're going to go up against, non-lethal, challenges to kind of get you going because it's too easy. Goblin crit, to prove that point. I think if there's some way to make it impactful, make it mean something, even the character or the player that has that character die, it'll mean something, right? You reference Critical Role, like they do such a great job of like how would you feel if your friend died? Like it really came across that way. So I think if you can, you know, make that, sometimes DMs can also sort of, random encounter, maybe you're gonna not go crazy and bump up the HP on a monster or bump up their damage output. But if you're going after the main bad guy, so to speak, and there could be a serious risk of it, lean into it, let it happen if it happens, and make it worthwhile.
Barry?
Yeah, man, you hit on a few good points there. I think as a DM, if say players are going against for the lack of the term, a boss, then make it obvious kind of to the characters that this is a moment where the players feel like death could happen. So then you have the group kind of ready for it. And like similar to you, Colin, I did some research into this and there's some really great points of view on this. But like you try to make it epic for them. And like I've even heard players getting a last word. DMs will let
Yeah.
them say something. You're dying. What are your last words to your thing? And there's even some places that are like, even rewind the combat so they get that if it happens very quickly. But like Egan, you had mentioned that at lower levels it shouldn't happen, because it's so easy. I mean, you maybe not have mentioned, meant that it shouldn't happen, but I think as a DM, if the goblin kills a member of the party in your level 1 to 3, what the DM should be ready for is to take that goblin and now he becomes a nemesis to that group. Like he's just killed a member of the party and he just turns and runs. Because now he's going back to the horde saying he killed a big adventurer. And now that death means something, right? The players have a nemesis to go after to, avenge the death of their friend, right? So,
I love it.
if death is a thing of your party, you know, if you can make it obvious. So that's, saying to the party, you're staring eye to eye with this creature and you're intimidated by this. Like, oh my goodness, this is probably the most frightening things you guys have ever seen. Uh, Make it reasonable. Like I think you kind of touched on this, Egan. Don't have a random encounter kill a player. That's ridiculous and pointless to
Yeah,
the game.
that really sucks. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But it does happen. You
Yeah.
roll a 1, you roll a natural 20, and they lop your head
Especially if they're
off.
being stupid, right? As
Yep.
Colin said.
Yep.
Or I
It
mean,
can happen.
the math rocks are just angry that one
Yeah,
night.
exactly.
It
Yeah.
happens. Yeah.
Allow the last words thing, I think would be a great way for a player who's just lost a character to make it a little bit more meaningful to the party. And then, as easy as it is to avoid death, and part of me hurts saying this, after the session, talk to that player and find out if resurrection is something they want to pursue. Because the player might be like, no, you know what? This death was epic. It's a great way. It's driving story. I just want him to stay dead. And I think that should be the player's choice, not necessarily the party's choice. And you could say to the party, like, if they are dead set to resurrect, they go through it and that soul doesn't want to come back to the body. Like that is something that is actually in the game where, if your soul doesn't want to come back, it doesn't have to. So the resurrection fails. So I would recommend to a DM to talk to the player after, be like, or do you want this character to come back in? And then, you get this whole scenario of how's that going to happen? Are you making a deal with a god? Did a god come down and say, I'm going to bring you back to life and now you owe me something. You got to do something for me. So there's lots of things, but, as a DM, make it kind of obvious that this could be somewhere where you die. Make it epic. Let them have a couple last words and then kill the bastards. You know, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, for sure. So, one point I'll add to this discussion, I think it's a really good idea when you're starting a new campaign and you're having your session 0, talk to the group about death. Okay, how are we going to deal with death in this group? Do we maybe death is not a thing? Instead, bury kind of the things you talked about. There's consequences like levels lost, permanent injuries, whatever it might be. That might be how you want to deal with it without having actual death. Um, it's important for a DM to remember, and I mentioned this earlier. Some people become very attached to their characters, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
it's an extension of themselves, and death could definitely affect them a lot more than you expect. So I think it's good to have that conversation ahead of time, kind of gauge everybody's thoughts around character death, and sort of add my 2 cents, in terms of making character deaths meaningful. I think that is definitely something a DM has to have in the back of their mind. It would really suck for you to have your favorite character traveling from point A to point B, and a random encounter comes along and you die during the random encounter. On your way to fight the big bad end guy, and your character dies in some stupid way because the math rocks are angry that night, right? So
Yeah.
those, from a DM standpoint, from my standpoint, I look at those things as a way to soften up the characters before they get to the big bad end guy. I don't try and put something together that is going to necessarily have a high potential to kill the characters. It's just there to get them to use up some resources, some hit points. So when they get there, that end battle is that much more that more difficult, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody wants their character death to be epic. I mean, you want to be able to talk about it forevermore, right? So,
Yeah.
as a DM, you definitely got to keep that in the back of their mind. So let's jump into the last question here. What are your thoughts on bringing characters back to life? So to resurrect or not to resurrect, and how easy do you make that? Barry, why don't you take us into this last question?
Personally, I think it's too easy currently the way Resurrection is, like it's just it's an actual dollar value. You need a certain gem of a certain value to pull off that spell. So that's where I stand. If a character dies and resurrection is a possibility in your campaign, it's got to be something that is epic in its own self. So the character comes back and it was a good god who brought them back, let's say, because the party couldn't afford the resurrection spell. There's got to be a consequence to that. They got to come back owing that god a favor. Boom, you got a side quest. It's fun, exciting for everybody. It's a way to earn back that character's get out of jail free card, or it could be an evil god, depending on how you want to do it. But it's got to be something again that if you're gonna throw resurrection in, there has to be some strings attached, or again, you've just eliminated the fear of death and they're gonna, oh, a dragon, I'll charge in, jump, coop, I'll get resurrected, I'll come back in, charge, boop. It's just unlimited lives in the video game, and that's the way they're gonna treat their character. And as a DM, that's one of the most disruptive things you can have in a campaign is the character who doesn't fear death because they just charge into everything and there's never any drama. It's hard to get that immersion, that feeling for the whole group. When you got Leroy Jenkins, I think you threw that out there charging in because he's like, it doesn't matter if I die, I'm just going to come back to life. I've got the gem in my backpack ready for that resurrection. Like no, it's not that easy. Like you gotta have a consequence to death. Resurrection is okay having a game because, like I said, if a character or a player really loves that character, it might be the best thing for the campaign to let them bring that character back. But there's going to be strings attached to that coming back. So I'm okay with it, but it's got to be used sparingly. Don't like off topic as a DM, don't let players just thumb through spell books and pick whatever spells that are there because resurrection is one they'll definitely pick. Don't be afraid as a DM to say, no, that spell this isn't commonly known. You'll need to go search that out. So
Yeah.
again, that makes that whole death thing a little more impactful if they have to, challenge themselves to find the resurrection spell beforehand. So those are my thoughts on it.
Egan?
You want to get to know somebody, kill their PC. You will get
Yeah.
all ends of the spectrum on reactions, and some are not pleasant. And yes, it can very much affect the table. I believe in resurrection in the game. I think it's there for a reason. I think that if they have the resources, if they have the spell, if they're a certain level, then yeah, I think they should be able to do that. But I agree with you, Barry. There has to be a price. This
Yeah.
isn't this isn't just a healing word. This is a big deal,
Yeah.
right? And I think you allow it if they have again the resources, the level, the spell, etc. But it's not that simple, right? Let's roll some. And again, we're going to quote him. I love how Mercer does it. I mean, it's not like he has all these players go through challenges. In essence, it's a skills challenge to see if that character will come back. I think that's a great way to do it. I'm also a fan of random resurrection. They roll on a table to see what type of race they come back as.
A reincarnation. Yeah.
Basically, yeah,
Yeah.
more reincarnation. I think that's fantastic. Barry, you mentioned, is it a benevolent god? Is it an evil god?
Yeah.
Is it a whimsical god, right? I mean, bards pray to all sorts of weird ass gods. They could just totally mess with them. It's like, all right, you are now an imp. See if you can perform, right?
Yeah.
I think that is, something that you can do. I also think a DM can use resurrection as a plot tool.
Yes.
Okay. I think that there is a way, like, what you can sort of have it in your sack, if you will, in your bag of holding, that when a player dies, a PC player dies, you have a whole storyline based on that. Like, okay, you're going to bring them back, or if, in order to do that, you have 7 days to get to the holy cleric in this town that's here. You got to battle through this. In the meantime, the guy's dead, or the god's going to come down, but he is going to ask you to perform this, or this. I love your idea of a nemesis, right? Like, you're coming back, but you have one purpose. And
Yeah.
you now have a flaw that controls you. So, like, let's say you get killed by a goblin. No matter what, you see a goblin, you have to attack, no matter what, even if it's a friendly goblin. Like, you can use this as a plot point and to drive a story, if and when a character dies. But to put a cap on it, I do think resurrection, it's part of it. I think we should do it, or I would do it,
Yeah.
for lack of a better term. So.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of in 5e. There's a lot of ways you can bring your characters back. I mean, there's revivify, raise dead, reincarnation, resurrection, true resurrection. That's just spells. I mean, there's magic
Yeah.
items and such like that. Um, I guess even technically you could use the wish spell. I mean, if you wanted to use the wish spell to bring
Wasted.
somebody back, yeah. But I agree that if a character death occurred in my campaign, I would want to turn bringing that character back, if that's what the player wants to do, into a new unexpected opportunity for a fantastic storyline. I mean, you have
Yeah.
things like, they make a deal with a patron. Maybe they come back in, for a short period of time, they come back in some unnatural form, like they're a ghost for a while, or who knows, somebody turns them into a flesh golem until they can, until um, so there's lots of things. If you look at our campaign, although this was NPC stuff, but to kind of give an idea, when um, when Anton died, you guys attempted to have him resurrected, but the cleric could not reach his soul,
Yeah.
right? To find out whether or not he wanted to come back.
Yep.
Um, and in the campaign, Douglin essentially resurrected his family, but the price on that was
Yep.
basically at any time he will call upon Douglin to give his life for
Yep.
something, right? So there's the price to be paid for being able to have that resurrection, right? So you really have the opportunities to flavor that. I definitely think it needs to be there because we just talked about the player who just loves their character. They're devastated that that character has died. You really need some way to potentially bring them back, right? To do that. But lots of good ways to flavor that in the campaign, right?
You can't have
Indeed.
necromancy without resurrection, right?
Absolutely.
Like it just doesn't seem right.
Bring your favorite character back as a zombie.
As a zombie. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, we are at the 40-minute. Who knows? Surprise,
Oh,
surprise. We've been able to talk 40 minutes about a D&D topic. But let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. Egan, final thoughts on death in D&D 5e?
make it epic. Make it epic. Lean into it. Work with the player. Work with the DM. If it happens, there's lots of ways that it could be a, dare I say, a positive experience, but it will hopefully always be memorable.
Yep. Barry?
I think two pieces of advice, one to a DM, one to a player. As a player, you're going to have to accept that at some point you're going to have a character die, and that is just part of the joy of playing. As crazy as that sounds, the joy of playing D&D, right? Death is a part of it. Death is impactful. We play D&D to experience life through other things, and death is a part of that. So don't avoid it in a game. Don't seek it out, but when it does happen, it happens. Roll with it and just accept it. As a DM, just use it as an opportunity to create something else. Like you said, Colin, it's a great way to create a storyline for the players to go after a resurrection. It's a great way to bring a character back in different ways. Like death is something that is traumatic, but a lot of creativity can come from that. And if you're in the DM seat, think about what you would do if a player died and have something kind of ready. It's just a scenario. It doesn't matter who it happens to. Just have something ready so that when it happens, you have a game plan to address it, talk with the player, and move forward. Otherwise, it's a massive, massive missed opportunity to create something even more impactful and more, as the word we're throwing out, epic. Like death has to be epic in the game. We're heroes. Unless you're playing a villain game, then we're not talking to you. But the heroes out there want to have an epic death. So as a DM, be ready for that and be able to create something from it that will be memorable for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I definitely think character death in D&D is just a part of the excitement. It's always there. It's always possible. Every battle, every situation that the characters get themselves into. I didn't always think that way. I think as I got a better understanding of the game, that changed. I know, even back during our big Storm King's Thunder, I didn't want characters to die. That was a mindset I had, and it changed the way I manipulated the game at times, right? A DM definitely needs to be aware of the situations they put the characters into and what the chances of character death are. Like that needs to be one of the dials that you are turning. Is this a moment when you want death to really be a possibility, or is this just a moment where you're softening the characters up for something else that is coming? Uh, we've said it. I'm just going to say it. I'm going to reinforce it. Make sure that character death is epic. Like you want to make it something that they remember, as well as I remember Crow True Blood dying almost 40 years ago. I still remember that first character death. I even know we were in the living room of our house, E and I sitting on the floor playing D&T. I remember all the details of that. It was a big deal to me, and you want character death to be like that,
Yeah.
right? All right, so guys, I think that's a wrap for episode 19 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. Hopefully, everyone has enjoyed tonight's topic. Um, just before we sign out, I do want to mention that JD popped in to say hello. So thank you,
Hey,
JD,
D.
for
Hey, JD,
stopping
buddy.
in. I was doing a lot of lip flapping tonight, so I didn't get to text back with him. But thanks very much, JD, for joining us there. Um, so our tavern talks occur Thursdays after each of our Saturday night Adventures in Emathan sessions. Our next session isn't until January 13th. So with all of the holiday festivities, travel, vacations, all that good stuff, we will pick up Adventures in Emathan in January. For those of you that might be watching this on YouTube, please support us by making sure to like our videos and subscribe to the channel. Hit that little bell icon so you'll be alerted when the next session occurs. So, guys, to end the session, we'll offer up a cheers. Cheers to you, JD. Have a great holiday season.
Happy
Thanks
holidays,
for
everybody.
joining us on in the tavern, and we hope everyone can join us again next time. Thanks,
Cheers.
guys. Bye for now.